Keanu Reeves was looking forward to a quiet evening. After a long week filled with work, interviews, and events, he just wanted a peaceful meal in a restaurant where he could sit down, enjoy his food, and be alone with his thoughts. Despite being one of the most famous actors in the world, Keanu often preferred simplicity. Crowds, cameras, and flashlights weren't part of his idea of relaxation. Tonight, he hoped, would be different. The restaurant he chose was small but popular, known for its warm lighting, comfortable atmosphere, and delicious menu. The kind of place where people came not just to eat, but to feel at home for a little while. As he walked through the doors, the soft buzz of conversation surrounded him. The smell of freshly cooked food filled the air, making him smile faintly. He took a deep breath, appreciating the calm energy. He was greeted by a waiter who seemed busy and slightly distracted. The man was moving quickly from table to table, balancing plates and drinks, trying to keep up with the steady flow of customers. When he finally reached Keanu's table, he glanced at him briefly and then looked back at his order pad. That was when things took an unexpected turn. The waiter made a comment crude, unnecessary, and surprising. It was almost casual, like he didn't think twice about saying it. "You don't really belong here, do you?" he said. The words hung in the air, sharp and out of place. Keanu froze for a moment, not because he was shocked, but because he wasn't expecting such disrespect in a place that felt safe and welcoming. Other diners noticed immediately. Some were staring openly, their curiosity and disbelief visible on their faces. Others tried to remain discreet, but it was impossible to ignore the tension that now filled the space around Keanu's table. Whispers passed from one table to another. People speculated, was that really Keanu Reeves? Did the waiter just insult him? Keanu's first instinct was calm observation. He was known for his kindness and composure, but he wasn't a person who ignored disrespect either. He paused, looking at the waiter, not with anger, but with a quiet intensity that made the man suddenly aware of the weight of his words. "Excuse me?" Keanu said softly, his voice polite but firm. The waiter blinked, startled. He had expected the man in front of him to either ignore the comment or storm out in anger. Instead, Keanu had asked him to repeat it. There was a long, uncomfortable pause. The waiter's confidence seemed to crumble under the gaze of someone who carried both fame and humility with equal measure. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and tried to recover. I didn't mean a... Keanu remained patient, allowing the man to find the right words. The silence in the room was noticeable now. Other customers had stopped their own conversations, watching quietly, sensing that something important was happening. It was a moment of human connection, of tension hanging in the air, and everyone could feel it. When the waiter finally managed to mumble an apology, it was awkward and unconvincing. Keanu didn't respond immediately. He let the words sink in, giving the man a chance to reflect. He had learned over the years that people often spoke thoughtlessly without realizing the impact of their words. A moment like this could either become a disaster or a lesson, depending on how it was handled. Instead of responding with anger, Keanu leaned back slightly and smiled, not a mocking smile, but one that carried understanding. He began to speak calmly, telling the waiter that words mattered, that how we speak to others shapes not just the moment, but the memories people carry with them. His tone was gentle yet firm, showing authority not through intimidation, but through quiet confidence. People at nearby tables listened, almost unconsciously. Keanu's presence was usually noticed, but now it wasn't just his fame that drew attention, it was his character. The way he handled the situation, without lashing out, without humiliation, made a deeper impression than any red carpet appearance or interview ever could. He shared a short story, something personal about how a small act of kindness once made a huge difference in his life. The story was simple, but it had weight. It reminded the waiter that everyone has a story, everyone has struggles, and that a little empathy can go a long way. Keanu's words weren't about shaming him, but about teaching him. They were about helping someone realize the effect of their actions without creating more harm. By the end of the conversation, the waiter was visibly shaken. His face was red, partly from embarrassment, partly from understanding the lesson he had just received. He apologized again, more sincerely this time, and Keanu nodded, accepting it with grace. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted immediately. What had started as tension and awkwardness slowly transformed into relief and admiration. Diners who had been watching quietly returned to their meals. But now there was a buzz of conversation about what had just happened. Some were talking about the waiter and his behavior. Others were marveling at Keanu's reaction, discussing how rare it is to see someone famous respond to insult with calmness, kindness, and wisdom. For a few moments, the restaurant was filled not just with the smell of food, but with a sense of shared human experience. Keanu sat down finally, still composed, and ordered his meal. He didn't make a scene. He didn't demand attention. He simply continued his evening as he had planned, quietly, peacefully. But the impact of his words lingered in the minds of everyone present. People would remember not just the incident, but the way it had been handled. By the time he left, the waiter was reflecting deeply on what had happened. He realized that a single thoughtless comment could have caused a lot of harm, but that a moment of understanding and humility could leave a lasting impression instead. And for the other diners, it was a reminder that true strength is not shown in anger or dominance, but in patience, empathy, and the ability to treat others with respect even when they fail to do the same. Keanu walked out into the night quietly. No cameras followed him. No flashes went off. It was just him in the street, just him and his thoughts. But inside the restaurant, the story of what had happened would be retold countless times. It became a quiet legend of that night, a story of respect, humility, and the power of human decency. People shared it with friends, posted about it online, and reflected on it in their own lives. That evening, the restaurant became more than a place to eat. It became a place where a simple act of patience and kindness reminded everyone present that fame does not define character, actions do. And sometimes, the most powerful moments happen in the quietest, most unexpected ways. After the initial exchange, the restaurant returned to its usual rhythm, or at least it tried to. People continued eating, servers walked quickly to and fro, and soft background music filled the room. But for many, the moment with Keanu Reeves and the waiter lingered in their minds. It was not every day that someone handled disrespect with such grace, and everyone seemed to feel it. Even the other staff noticed something had shifted. The waiter who had insulted Keanu was sitting at a nearby table for a brief moment, trying to collect himself. He replayed the incident in his mind. How could he have spoken so carelessly? He had been so distracted by the crowd, by orders, by trying to keep everything running smoothly, that he had forgotten the simple rules of politeness. And now, standing there, he felt the weight of his mistake. Meanwhile, Keanu quietly scanned the restaurant. He wasn't looking for attention, nor was he judging anyone else. He was simply observing the environment, making sure that he could enjoy his evening without any further disruptions. The calm and patient way he handled the insult seemed to ripple through the room. Diners and staff alike noticed how different it was from the reactions most people would expect. There was no yelling, no confrontation, only understanding and quiet dignity. Other diners whispered to each other, sharing what they had seen. Some were amazed. "Did you hear how he spoke to the waiter?" "So calm, so respectful," one said. Another added, "Most people would have yelled or left in anger, but he just made the point without hurting anyone." It became clear that the incident had left an impression far bigger than the insult itself. The waiter had unintentionally created a teaching moment, one that people would talk about for a long time. Keanu's focus returned to his table, and he began to reflect on his own experiences. Over the years, he had faced criticism, rude comments, and unfair treatment more times than he could count. And yet, he had always believed that responding with patience and kindness could turn even the most negative situations into opportunities for understanding. He had seen firsthand that a calm and respectful approach could often change people's perspectives faster than anger ever could. As he sat quietly, a few other customers started approaching him. They didn't want autographs or photos, they simply wanted to share a word of appreciation. Some thanked him for the way he handled the situation. Others said how inspiring it was to witness such calm in the face of rudeness. Keanu listened to them, nodded politely, and responded with gentle smiles. It wasn't a performance. It was genuine human connection. Each interaction, even brief, carried warmth, showing that Fame had not changed his fundamental kindness. Back at the table, the waiter was trying to adjust his mindset. He felt nervous, ashamed, but also oddly hopeful. Keanu's words had a strange effect. Instead of feeling humiliated, he felt challenged to do better not just professionally, but as a person. He began to think about how small gestures and choices shape every interaction in life. Perhaps his comment could have ended in disaster, but it hadn't. And now, he had a chance to learn something valuable from it. The kitchen staff, who had witnessed the exchange from afar, discussed it quietly among themselves. Some said they had never seen a celebrity handle a difficult moment in such a simple, human way. Others reflected on their own behavior, thinking about times they had been impatient or rude. The story had become more than just a moment in a restaurant. It was becoming a lesson in human decency. The atmosphere in the restaurant, although busy, had subtly changed. There was a gentle sense of respect in the air. Patrons spoke a little softer, servers moved with a more conscious awareness, and even the music seemed to fit the calm, reflective energy that now filled the space. It was as if Keanu's quiet strength had silently influenced everyone present, reminding them that a single person could make a significant difference through their behavior. Keanu's meal arrived, and he began to eat slowly, savoring the flavors. He did not rush, nor did he seek attention. Yet the presence of diners, some still glancing at him discreetly, created a curious dynamic. People wanted to observe, to witness the person they admired not as a celebrity on a screen, but as a human being in a real-life moment. And what they saw was extraordinary not because of fame, but because of the way Keanu handled the delicate, tense situation with grace and empathy. At one point, the waiter returned to Keanu's table. Not as an employee serving food, but as someone seeking guidance. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "I'm sorry for earlier," he said. "I didn't mean what I said. I was careless." Keanu looked at him calmly, nodding. "I understand," he replied. "We all have moments when we don't think before we speak. What matters is that we notice it and try to do better next time." The waiter seemed to relax slightly. Keanu's response wasn't judgmental or condescending, it was encouraging. It made the man feel seen, heard, and guided rather than scolded. This simple exchange transformed the tension that had filled the room into a moment of connection and learning. The other diners, who had been watching discreetly, whispered softly among themselves. Some admired the waiter for apologizing. Others marveled at Keanu's patience. A few even reflected on how they might handle similar situations in their own lives. It was a subtle, shared human experience that brought strangers together in understanding, empathy, and admiration. Throughout the evening, Keanu remained calm and composed. He didn't make anyone uncomfortable, nor did he try to dominate the scene. His presence was gentle yet commanding, quietly reminding everyone that dignity and kindness often speak louder than anger or confrontation. And even though he was a global superstar tonight, he was simply a man showing that being human means responding to mistakes with patience and care. By the time the meal was almost finished, the initial incident seemed like a distant memory, replaced by reflection and subtle lessons. The waiter, once flustered and embarrassed, now carried a quiet sense of understanding. He moved through the restaurant differently, more mindful of his words and actions, aware of the lasting effects they could have. And for the diners, the story had become more than just entertainment. It had become a small lesson in how to navigate conflict with compassion. As the evening drew on, Keanu paid his bill and prepared to leave. There were no dramatic farewells or drawn-out goodbyes. He simply stood, nodded politely to the staff, and walked toward the door. Yet, even in his quiet departure, the impact of his actions lingered. People whispered to each other, sharing what they had witnessed, marveling at the way he handled an insult with calmness, grace, and wisdom. Outside, the city lights reflected on the wet pavement from a recent drizzle. Keanu walked alone for a moment, enjoying the quiet night air. He thought briefly about the evening, about the small interaction, the lessons shared, and the human connections made. In his life, fame often brought chaos and attention. But moments like this reminded him why simple acts of kindness and patience mattered most. Back inside the restaurant, the staff shared a quiet laugh, relieved that the situation hadn't escalated. Patrons continued their conversations, now with stories to tell about witnessing not just a celebrity, but a truly remarkable human moment. And for the waiter, the lesson was clear: one careless word can create tension, but a single chance to reflect and apologize can transform an entire experience. That night, Keanu Reeves wasn't a movie star on a screen or a name in a magazine. He was a person showing that respect, empathy, and patience are the most powerful tools anyone can possess. And even though he left quietly, the evening would be remembered by everyone present as a rare, human moment of connection, humility, and understanding that went far beyond fame. The night was slowly settling over the city, and inside the restaurant a quiet calm had returned. Yet the incident earlier with the waiter lingered in everyone's mind. Diners whispered softly to each other, some sharing the story, others reflecting on what they had seen. It wasn't just the fact that Keanu Reeves had been insulted, it was the way he had handled it. There was something almost magical about the calmness and dignity he showed, something that turned a negative moment into an unexpected lesson for everyone present. After finishing a few bites of his meal, Keanu looked around the restaurant once more. His eyes met the waiters, and there was a moment of silent understanding between them. It was subtle but meaningful. The waiter's face showed a mixture of embarrassment, regret, and curiosity. He had expected anger, outrage, or at least visible frustration from someone as famous as Keanu. Instead, he saw calm, patience, and quiet authority. That moment, small as it was, carried weight. It carried the kind of weight that changes people without them even realizing it. Immediately, Keanu's presence seemed to have a ripple effect. Staff members moved with a little more care, glancing at him briefly as they went about their tasks. Patrons watched discreetly, curious but respectful. The energy in the room had changed. What could have been tension and discomfort became a shared moment of observation and reflection. People noticed how differently a situation could unfold depending on the response. And it was as if Keanu had silently taught the room a lesson in patience and empathy. The waiter, though still nervous, found himself compelled to act. He approached Keanu's table again, this time with more composure. "I want to apologize properly," he said, his voice quieter, more sincere. "Earlier I spoke without thinking. I didn't mean to insult you. I hope you can forgive me." Keanu looked at him gently, nodding. "It's okay," he replied calmly. "We all say things we don't mean sometimes. What matters is that we recognize it and try to do better next time." The simplicity of his words was powerful. They didn't scold, they didn't shame, they simply conveyed understanding and guidance. The waiter seemed to relax for the first time that evening. He realized that this wasn't about fame or ego. It was about human behavior, about making the choice to respond with thoughtfulness rather than anger. He quietly thanked Keanu and returned to his duties, but the lesson had clearly settled deep in his mind. Around the restaurant, diners continued to notice. Some whispered to their companions, sharing what they had witnessed. "I can't believe he handled that so well," one said. "Most people would have yelled or walked out, but he stayed calm and kind." Another added, "It's amazing to see someone famous act like a regular human being with so much empathy." These small conversations carried the story beyond the immediate moment. Spreading the lesson quietly from table to table, Keanu returned to his meal, eating slowly and thoughtfully. He was not in a rush and he didn't seek attention. His calm presence alone seemed to have a subtle influence on the room. Other diners, even those not directly involved, appeared to soften in their interactions. Some servers walked past more mindfully, while others spoke a little softer to customers. There was a sense of awareness in the air, a reminder that small gestures and words mattered in ways most people didn't always realize. As he finished the last bite of his meal, Keanu began to reflect quietly on his own experiences. Over the years, he had encountered rude comments, criticism, and unfair judgments countless times. Some people had insulted him directly, others behind his back. And yet he had learned that responding with anger or resentment rarely helped. What truly made a difference was patience, empathy, and the ability to treat others with respect, even when they failed to do the same. The lesson was subtle, but it was clear. Kindness is not weakness. Calmness is not passivity. Responding with dignity in the face of insult can change not only the moment but also the people involved. It can turn tension into understanding, frustration into reflection, and embarrassment into growth. This was exactly what Keanu had demonstrated, and the effect was already visible in the room around him. The waiter, now more composed, observed the scene from a distance. He realized that this experience was not just about him or his mistake. It was about understanding how one interaction could ripple outward, affecting everyone present. He began thinking about the choices he made, the words he spoke, and the attitude he carried. It was a rare opportunity for growth, and he knew he couldn't let it pass without learning from it. Other diners started quietly approaching Keanu, not for autographs, but for words of encouragement. They shared small thoughts, thanking him for the way he handled the situation. Some expressed how inspiring it was to see such patience in a world where anger often feels faster and easier. Keanu listened, nodded, and responded gently, never making anyone feel awkward or uncomfortable. Each brief interaction was filled with genuine warmth, showing that fame had not diminished his humanity. As the evening progressed, the initial incident began to feel less like an insult and more like a turning point. Diners discussed it quietly, servers reflected on it silently, and the waiter carried it as a lesson in humility. The restaurant, though busy, felt lighter somehow. Tension had transformed into understanding, and a potentially negative situation had become a quiet, shared moment of human connection. Keanu's approach was simple but effective. He did not lecture, he did not demand respect, and he did not seek recognition. He simply responded with patience, kindness, and calm authority. And in doing so, he reminded everyone present of something important, that human interactions are shaped not by what is said to us, but by how we choose to respond. The waiter, once flustered and nervous, now carried a sense of responsibility. He realized that his words had consequences, but so did his actions afterward. By reflecting, apologizing, and striving to do better, he had turned a negative encounter into a lesson he would carry with him. And in that quiet understanding, a small transformation occurred not just for him, but for the atmosphere of the entire restaurant. Keanu eventually finished his meal and prepared to leave. He didn't make a scene. He didn't demand attention or linger for praise. He simply stood, nodded politely to the staff, and walked toward the door. But even in his quiet exit, the impact of his presence and his response to the earlier insult lingered. Diners whispered to each other, sharing the story and reflecting on the lesson they had just witnessed. Outside, the city lights shone softly on the streets, and Keanu walked alone, enjoying the peaceful night air. He thought about the small moments that defined a person's character, the choices made in tension, the words spoken in care, the calm presence maintained when others might lose theirs. Fame was not the measure of a person. Compassion, patience, and empathy were. And in this small, ordinary restaurant, a lesson in human behavior had quietly unfolded for all who witnessed it. Back inside, the staff discussed the incident quietly among themselves. Some shared how rare it was to see someone famous act so naturally, with such warmth and patience. Others reflected on their own behavior, realizing how often they might act without thinking. The story became more than a personal encounter. It became a shared reflection on human interaction and the small choices that shape our daily lives. For the waiter, this night would not be forgotten. He learned that a careless word could hurt, but a thoughtful response could heal and inspire. And for the diners, it was a reminder that witnessing kindness and humility in action is far more powerful than seeing anger or revenge. The restaurant, once ordinary, had become a place where a quiet act of humanity had left a lasting impression. As Keanu disappeared into the night, the lesson lingered in the minds of everyone present, that patience, kindness, and calmness are tools of incredible strength. They can turn tension into understanding, mistakes into learning, and ordinary moments into extraordinary memories. And even though the incident had begun with an insult, it ended as a quiet story of human dignity, shared reflection, and the surprising power of empathy. After Keanu Reeves quietly left the restaurant, the story didn't end there. In fact, it was only just beginning. Diners who had witnessed the incident couldn't stop talking about it. They shared the story with friends and family, describing not just the insult the waiter had made, but more importantly, how Keanu had responded. Everyone seemed to agree. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. Some people immediately went online to share their experience. A short post on social media quickly gained attention. A celebrity, insulted in a busy restaurant, had responded with kindness and patience instead of anger. The post described Keanu's calm voice, the way he listened to the waiter, and the lesson he had shared. Within hours, it was being shared widely, with comments pouring in from people all over the world. Fans praised him not for his films, his fame, or his wealth, but for his character. They called it a lesson in humility, a demonstration of what true kindness looks like. People reflected on their own behavior, realizing how often they reacted with anger or frustration instead of understanding. It was remarkable to see someone of Keanu's stature handle a difficult moment in such a simple, human way. News outlets soon picked up the story. It was featured as a small human interest piece, but it quickly caught the attention of a wider audience. Journalists wrote about the incident, highlighting how rare it was to see fame treated with humility and respect. Headlines didn't focus on the insult or the waiter's mistake, they focused on Keanu's response, emphasizing the lesson of patience, empathy, and human dignity. Meanwhile, inside the restaurant, life continued, but the atmosphere remained subtly different. Diners who had witnessed the incident returned to their meals, but they carried the story in their minds. Staff members shared their reflections quietly among themselves. Some said they had learned to be more thoughtful in their interactions. Others admitted that they had rushed through their duties without paying attention to the way their words or actions might affect others. It was a moment of reflection, quietly shaping behavior in small but meaningful ways. The waiter, who had once felt embarrassed and nervous, was now feeling something entirely different. He realized that this moment could change not just how he approached his work, but how he treated people in general. He thought about the careless words he had spoken and how they could have escalated into a public scene. Instead, because of Keanu's patience and calm guidance, it had turned into a moment of learning. He felt grateful, even a little inspired, to be reminded that everyone has the power to create positive change through simple choices. As news of the incident spread online, people began sharing their own experiences of witnessing kindness in unexpected situations. Some stories were about small, everyday acts, like someone helping a stranger carry groceries or a teacher patiently explaining something to a struggling student. Others shared personal experiences of being treated with respect after being insulted or misunderstood. The story of Keanu Reeves became a symbol, reminding people that patience and empathy are powerful and contagious. In the days that followed, many fans reflected on the incident in forums, discussion boards, and social media threads. They wrote about how inspiring it was to see a celebrity act like an ordinary human being, someone who could make mistakes, face disrespect, and yet respond with grace. They shared personal takeaways, saying they wanted to respond to conflicts in their own lives with more calm and kindness. The story wasn't just about fame. It was about how a single choice could ripple outward, affecting others in ways people might never realize. For the restaurant itself, the incident brought a subtle change in reputation. Patrons who had heard about it were more curious to visit, not just for the food, but to experience the atmosphere where a small but powerful human lesson had occurred. The staff, having witnessed the interaction firsthand, carried a renewed sense of mindfulness in their work. They realized that every interaction, every word mattered, not just in the moment, but in how it shaped the day for someone else. Meanwhile, the waiter began noticing something surprising. A few customers who had seen the exchange smiled at him, not in judgment but in encouragement. Some quietly said thank you for handling the situation well. It was a reminder that mistakes could be redeemed when met with honesty, humility, and a willingness to learn. The entire experience became a turning point for him. a quiet but meaningful step in personal growth. Across the world, fans shared messages of appreciation for Keanu. Some described how his calm handling of the situation had inspired them to think differently about their own responses to anger or disrespect. Others reflected on the rarity of seeing fame paired with humility and empathy. It became a discussion not about gossip or scandal, but about human behavior, teaching, and the power of calmness in moments of tension. Social media posts included not just words, but drawings, memes, and short videos illustrating the lesson. People emphasized that true strength is not shown in shouting or retaliation, but in remaining composed and responding thoughtfully. The story spread far beyond the original restaurant, reaching millions who had never been there but could imagine the scene vividly. A tense moment transformed into a lesson. All because of one man's patience and empathy. Some fans even began sharing personal reflections. They wrote about times when they had reacted too quickly, when they had let anger take over, or when they had hurt someone without meaning to. Seeing Keanu's example encouraged them to consider a different approach in the future. They realized that moments of conflict didn't have to end in negativity. They could become opportunities for learning, understanding, and connection. Even journalists commented on the story, noting that while celebrities are often judged harshly, it is rare to see fame used in such a quiet, powerful way. Keanu's response became a talking point for human behavior experts, who praised the example he had set. They said it reminded people that calmness, empathy, and patience are more influential than public displays of anger or confrontation. Back in the restaurant, the story of that evening became a sort of legend among staff. They talked about it quietly to new employees and shared the lesson with each other. It was no longer just about the interaction between Keanu and the waiter. It had become a reminder that simple human choices, made with care and thoughtfulness, could ripple outward and inspire others in ways no one could predict. For the waiter, the impact was personal and long-lasting. He found himself more mindful in daily interactions, thinking before he spoke and considering the effects of his words on others. He carried a quiet sense of pride not in what had happened, but in how he had responded after learning from it. The embarrassment he had initially felt turned into growth, a lesson that he would carry with him for years to come. Meanwhile, the diners who had witnessed the exchange told the story over and over, sharing not just the facts but the feeling of the moment. They spoke about the calm in Keanu's voice, the gentle way he guided the situation, and the way a tense moment had been transformed into a lesson for everyone present. It became a story of hope and human kindness, something people wanted to carry with them long after leaving the restaurant. In the days following, the story reached news outlets, blogs, and social media pages around the world. Fans shared it with pride, highlighting the rare instance of someone famous acting not from ego or fame, but from genuine human decency. The incident sparked conversations about respect, humility, and empathy, and people began sharing their own small stories of kindness in everyday life. It was a reminder that even ordinary interactions could become extraordinary lessons if handled with care. The story of Keanu Reeves and the waiter became more than a simple encounter. It became a symbol of how human behavior can inspire others. It reminded people that everyone, famous or not, faces moments where they are tested. And in those moments, the choice to act with patience, kindness, and understanding can have effects far beyond the initial situation. Even weeks later, diners who had been there remembered the story vividly. They described it to friends, co-workers, and family members. The incident had become a small, meaningful part of their lives, a lesson they could carry with them in moments of frustration or conflict. And the waiter, too, found that his perspective had shifted, learning that a single moment of humility and reflection could change how he approached the world every day. In the end, what could have been a simple story of insult and embarrassment became a tale of reflection, inspiration, and human connection. Keanu's calm response turned tension into learning, a small moment into a shared lesson, and a negative interaction into an example of what patience and kindness can achieve. The story spread far beyond the restaurant, touching the lives of countless people and leaving a quiet, lasting impression on everyone who heard it. Days passed after the incident, but the story of that night in the restaurant continued to resonate with everyone who had been there. Diners, staff, and even people who had only read about it online felt a quiet sense of reflection. The story had spread far beyond the small restaurant, touching people who had never witnessed it in person. And even though it had started with a simple insult, it ended as a profound lesson in human behavior and empathy. The waiter, in particular, felt the most significant change. What had once been a moment of embarrassment had transformed into a moment of growth. He thought about the evening constantly, replaying the interaction with Keanu in his mind. He realized that the actor's calmness, patience, and understanding had taught him something far more valuable than a lecture or punishment ever could. It wasn't just about being polite at work, it was about being mindful, being patient, and considering how words and actions affect others. He began approaching his work differently. When serving customers, he took extra care to listen attentively, speak kindly, and notice the small details that could make someone's day better. His shift in behavior didn't go unnoticed. Other staff members started to see the change and, inspired by the lesson he had indirectly learned, began practicing the same thoughtfulness in their own interactions. The ripple effect that began with one calm response had now expanded to touch the lives of many. For the diners who had been present that night, the story remained a topic of conversation for weeks. They didn't just share it as a celebrity anecdote, they shared it as a story of human connection. It wasn't about him being famous, one diner said to a friend. It was about the way he handled a tough situation. That's what made it inspiring. Others nodded in agreement, reflecting on their own experiences of anger, impatience, or frustration, and considering how they might respond differently in the future. Online, the story continued to grow. Fans posted reflections about the incident, often using it as a reminder that true strength is found in patience and empathy, not in aggression or pride. Some shared personal stories, explaining how a moment of kindness or calm had changed their own lives, just as Keanu's response had changed the waiter's behavior. The narrative spread like wildfire, inspiring conversations about humility, compassion, and the importance of human connection. Even those who had only read the story were impacted. Teachers, parents, coworkers, and strangers alike reflected on what it meant to respond with empathy. They shared it in classrooms, offices, and family gatherings, using it as an example of how one person can influence many without even realizing it. The lesson was simple yet powerful. When faced with negativity or disrespect, responding with patience and understanding can have effects far beyond the initial moment. Keanu himself remained quiet about the incident, never seeking praise or recognition. That was part of what made the story so compelling. He didn't act for attention or applause, he acted out of genuine kindness and understanding. And that authenticity made it resonate with people so strongly. The world often expects celebrities to be dramatic, to react in extremes. But here was a man who demonstrated that quiet dignity and empathy are far more impactful than any loud response ever could be. The waiter, in particular, carried the lesson forward. He thought about the words he had spoken and the way Keanu had responded. It made him consider not just his actions in the restaurant, but how he interacted with everyone he met. Over time, he noticed a change, not just in himself, but in others around him. Co-workers and customers responded more positively, and small conflicts were diffused with understanding rather than escalation. One small moment, handled with calmness, had created a lasting ripple effect in the real world. Meanwhile, the story continued to circulate on social media, with people sharing their own reflections. Some wrote about being inspired to be kinder to strangers. Others spoke about responding to criticism without anger. Many commented on how rare it was to see humility paired with fame, and how much they admired Keanu for setting such an example. It became clear that the incident was more than a restaurant story, it had become a lesson in humanity, one that anyone could learn from and apply in their own life. Back at the restaurant, life slowly returned to normal, but the memory of that night lingered. Staff members continued to discuss the lessons they had learned, and customers often mentioned the story in passing, keeping the memory alive. For the waiter, it was a turning point. He felt more aware of the power of words and actions, more conscious of how he treated people, and more patient when dealing with difficult situations. The experience had changed him in a way that no ordinary training or lecture ever could. For Keanu, the night was just one of many ordinary moments in his life. But for everyone else, it was extraordinary. It was a story of grace under pressure, patience in the face of disrespect, and empathy when it might have been easier to respond with anger. The simplicity of his actions was what made them so impactful. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't dramatic, and it didn't make headlines immediately, but it made a real difference in the lives of those who witnessed it. In the weeks that followed, the waiter continued to reflect on the evening. He realized that life often presents moments where people are tested, moments where they can choose anger, frustration, or impatience, or moments where they can choose understanding, patience, and empathy. That single interaction with Keanu had taught him the power of choice, the impact of quiet dignity, and the importance of handling conflict with care. Other diners, too, carried the story with them. They spoke about it at work, at school, and with friends and family. They didn't just tell it as an interesting celebrity anecdote, they told it as a lesson in human behavior. The story reminded people that fame does not define character, but choices do. How we respond to situations, how we treat others, and how we navigate conflict are what truly matter in life. The lessons spread far and wide, inspiring people from all walks of life. Parents used it to teach children about respect and empathy. Teachers shared it in classrooms as an example of calmness and patience. Colleagues discussed it at work, reflecting on how to handle disagreements without anger. And somewhere in all of this, the quiet restaurant, the nervous waiter, and the calm actor became a symbol of what it means to act with integrity and understanding. Even months later, the story remained relevant. Fans continued to share it online, reminding each other of the power of kindness, patience, and empathy. It became a story people returned to when they needed inspiration or guidance, a reminder that small actions can have a lasting impact. One evening, one calm response had created a ripple that touched countless lives around the world. In the end, the story of Keanu Reeves and the waiter became more than just a story of an insult and a reaction. It became a story about the choices we make, the impact of our words, and the power of human connection. It reminded people that responding with patience, understanding, and empathy is never weak. It is a form of strength that can change lives, shape behavior, and leave a lasting impression far beyond the moment. For the waiter, for the diners, and for countless people who read about it online. The lesson was clear. One person acting with calmness and compassion can create a ripple of positive change. The insult, which could have become a negative memory, was transformed into a lasting story of human dignity, teaching, and inspiration. And even though Keanu Reeves left the restaurant quietly that night, with no cameras and no crowds following him, the effect of his actions continued to resonate. It reminded everyone that fame is fleeting, but kindness, patience, and empathy endure. That a single moment, handled with thoughtfulness, can inspire reflection, learning, and change in ways that no one could have predicted. Ultimately, the incident became a quiet legend, a story retold countless times, inspiring people to choose patience over anger, understanding over judgment, and kindness over harshness. It was a reminder that even in the smallest, most ordinary moments, human connection and dignity can shine the brightest, leaving a lasting mark on the world.